I watched from my hospital bed as my sister drove past in her brand new Mercedes. The same week my parents told me they couldn't afford my life-changing surgery. What they didn't know was that Grandma had been watching too, and she was about to change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emma Hayes, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. Growing up, I always believed family meant unconditional support. I was raised to think that when times got tough, your family would be there to catch you when you fell. But sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who let you down in the most devastating ways. And sometimes, salvation comes from unexpected places, teaching you that family isn't always defined by blood, but by the depth someone is willing to go to show you they care. I was diagnosed with severe scoliosis when I was 16. At first, my parents dismissed my complaints about back pain as typical teenage dramatics. "You're just trying to get out of helping with chores," my mother would say, rolling her eyes, whenever I winced while loading the dishwasher. My father was slightly more sympathetic but equally dismissive. "It's growing pains, Emma. Everyone goes through them." But the pain kept getting worse. Simple tasks like sitting through a class or carrying my backpack became excruciating. It wasn't until I collapsed during track practice that my parents finally took me to see a doctor. The diagnosis came quickly after that: severe progressive scoliosis with a 52-degree curvature that was rapidly worsening. The specialist didn't mince words. Without corrective surgery, I would face a lifetime of chronic pain, possible nerve damage, and eventually, limited mobility. I still remember the doctor's office, the sterile smell of disinfectant, the anatomical posters on the wall showing perfect spines unlike my twisted one, and the grave expression on Dr. Meyer's face as he explained the situation to my parents. My mother's face had gone pale, while my father kept asking about costs and insurance coverage. That should have been my first warning sign. Our insurance would cover part of the procedure, but there was still a significant out-of-pocket expense, $45,000. To be exact, it might as well have been $1 million to my middle-class family. My father worked as a manager at a local manufacturing plant, and my mother was a part-time receptionist at a dental office. We lived comfortably in our modest 4-bedroom house in Mapleton, but we weren't wealthy by any means. "We'll figure something out," my father had said on the drive home, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. My mother had remained silent, staring out the window with a tight expression that I couldn't quite read. What made everything more complicated was the fact that I had a younger sister, Olivia, who was the undisputed star of our family. 2 years younger than me, Olivia was everything I wasn't: outgoing, effortlessly popular, and our parents' clear favorite. While I struggled with social anxiety and preferred the company of books, Olivia collected friends like trophies and excelled at everything she touched. She was captain of the cheerleading squad, president of the student council, and maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA without seeming to try. Growing up in Olivia's shadow had always been challenging, but I'd learned to accept my place in the family dynamic. I was the quiet, responsible one. She was the golden child. That was just how things were. But I never imagined that this dynamic would extend to something as serious as my health. The weeks following my diagnosis were filled with tense conversations behind closed doors. I would catch snippets of my parents' arguments late at night when they thought I was asleep. "We can't afford this right now, Thomas," my mother would hiss. "What about college funds? What about our retirement?" "She's in pain, Catherine," my father would counter, though his protests grew weaker as the days passed. "Everyone has pain," my mother would reply. "She'll adapt. People live with scoliosis all the time." What they didn't understand, or chose not to understand, was that my case wasn't mild. Dr. Myers had been clear. Without intervention, the curvature would continue to progress, potentially affecting my heart and lung function as I got older. This wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about preventing disability. Meanwhile, the pain was becoming unbearable. I started missing school days because I couldn't get out of bed. Simple tasks like showering or putting on shoes became monumental challenges. My friends gradually stopped calling when I repeatedly canceled plans. My world was shrinking, confined to my bedroom and the occasional doctor's appointment. Through it all, Olivia continued to thrive. She had just gotten her driver's license and was constantly talking about how she needed her own car. Everyone in cheer has their own car, she would complain at dinner. It's so embarrassing having Dad drop me off at practice. I would sit silently, picking at my food, trying to find a position that didn't send shooting pain down my spine. My parents would nod sympathetically at Olivia's plight while avoiding my gaze. Then came the day that would change everything. It was a Tuesday morning, and I had managed to drag myself to school despite barely sleeping due to the pain. I was at my locker when Olivia bounded up to me, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mom and Dad are getting me a car for my birthday," she squealed, loud enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. Not just any car, a Mercedes CLA. Can you believe it? Jessica's parents only got her a used Honda. I stood there, frozen as the implications washed over me. A Mercedes. Even a base model would cost at least $40,000. Almost exactly what my surgery would cost. The room seemed to tilt, and I had to grab my locker to steady myself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's great, Liv, I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. When did they decide this? They've been planning it for months, apparently, she said, completely oblivious to my shock. Dad's been putting money aside since last year. It's going to be white with tan interior, and they're picking it up next week. Months. They had been planning this for months, which meant they had been setting aside money for Olivia's luxury car, at the same time they were telling me they couldn't afford my surgery. The surgery that would allow me to live without constant pain, to have a normal future. I made it through 2 more classes before the pain, both physical and emotional, became too much. I called my grandmother to pick me up, unable to face my parents. Grandma Helen was my father's mother, a retired nurse who had been increasingly concerned about my condition. Unlike my parents, she never dismissed my pain or made me feel like I was exaggerating. When she saw my face as I climbed into her car, she immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened, sweetheart?" she asked, her kind eyes crinkling with concern. I broke down, telling her everything between sobs. About the car, about how long my parents had been planning it, about how they had been lying to me about not having the money for my surgery. Grandma Helen's expression darkened with each word, her normally gentle demeanor hardening into something I'd never seen before. "Stay with me tonight," she said firmly. "I'll call your parents and let them know." That night, in the comfort of Grandma Helen's cozy guest room, I finally allowed myself to face the truth I'd been avoiding. My parents valued Olivia's happiness over my health. It wasn't just about favoritism anymore. It was about fundamental worth. In their eyes, I was simply worth less. The realization broke something inside me. I cried until there were no tears left, while Grandma Helen sat beside me, stroking my hair and murmuring comforting words. When I finally fell into an exhausted sleep, I had no idea that Grandma was already forming a plan that would change the course of all our lives. The next morning, I woke to the sounds of Grandma Helen on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was sharp in a way I'd never heard before. "No, Thomas, you listen to me," she was saying. "I've never interfered in how you and Catherine raise your children, but this crosses a line. Emma needs that surgery, and you're buying Olivia a luxury car. Have you lost your minds?" There was a pause as my father presumably tried to defend himself. "Don't give me that nonsense about different accounts and budgets," Grandma continued. "Money is fungible, and you know it. You're choosing a car over your daughter's health. How do you sleep at night?" Another pause. "Well, I'm glad you've thought it through so thoroughly," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've made your choice clear. Now I'll make mine." When I entered the kitchen, Grandma Helen was sitting at the table with a cup of tea, her face flushed with anger, but her eyes clear and determined. "Your father and I had a chat," she said simply. "He seems to think that your situation isn't urgent, and that you can learn to manage while they save up for your surgery. Eventually. After Olivia gets her car, of course." The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. They really said that? "Not in those exact words, but that was the gist," Grandma replied. "But don't you worry. I didn't raise my son to be this kind of father, and I'm not about to stand by and watch him fail you." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm going to help you, Emma. Whatever it takes." I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time, but I would soon find out. Grandma Helen had been widowed for 15 years. My grandfather had been a successful investment banker, and he had left her very comfortable. She lived modestly, by choice, not necessity, in the same small house they had shared for 40 years. What none of us had realized was just how comfortable she really was. That afternoon, Grandma Helen took me to see Dr. Myers. Not for a checkup, but to discuss scheduling my surgery. When the topic of payment came up, she simply pulled out her checkbook. "I'll be covering the costs," she informed the stunned receptionist. "All of them, and I'd like to schedule this as soon as possible." Dr. Myers managed to find an opening just 3 weeks later. 3 weeks that would change everything about my relationship with my family. When I returned home that evening, my parents were waiting. They tried to act normal, as if the conversation with Grandma Helen had never happened, as if they hadn't chosen a luxury car over my health. "How was your stay with Grandma?" my mother asked brightly, chopping vegetables for dinner with precise, aggressive movements. "Enlightening," I replied, watching her carefully. "She took me to see Dr. Myers today." My father looked up from his newspaper. "Oh, what did he say?" "He said I'm scheduled for surgery in 3 weeks. Grandma's paying for it." The knife in my mother's hand stilled. My father's newspaper lowered slowly. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Shock, guilt, perhaps even relief that the problem was being solved without costing them anything. "Emma," my father began, "we were going to find a way to make this work. We just needed more time." "More time?" I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. "While you're buying Olivia a Mercedes? Don't lie to me anymore. At least have the decency to be honest about your priorities." My mother's face flushed. "That's not fair. Olivia's car comes from a different account. We've been saving for her 16th birthday since she was born." "And you never thought to save for medical emergencies? Or did you just not bother saving? For mine?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Just then, Olivia bounded down the stairs. "Did I hear someone say Mercedes?" she asked excitedly. "Dad, did you tell Emma about my surprise?" The timing was so absurd I almost laughed. "It's not a surprise anymore, Liv. You told me yesterday, remember? Right before I left school sick. Again." Olivia had the grace to look embarrassed. "Oh, right. Sorry, I forgot." My mother quickly changed the subject. "Emma's going to have her surgery in 3 weeks. Grandma Helen is paying for it." Olivia's eyes widened. "That's great. You'll be all better for prom then, right? Because Jessica and I were thinking of doing a group thing, and you could totally come if you're feeling better." The casual way she lumped my life-changing surgery in with prom plans was so typically Olivia that I couldn't even be angry. She wasn't malicious. She was just self-centered in the way my parents had always allowed her to be. "I'll be in recovery For at least 6 weeks, I said. So no, I won't be going to prom. Oh. Her face fell momentarily before brightening again. Well, we'll take lots of pictures for you. Over the next week, an uncomfortable tension settled over our house. My parents seemed caught between guilt and resentment. Guilt that someone else had to step in to take care of their daughter, resentment that their parenting was being implicitly criticized. They avoided discussing the surgery or Grandma Helen's involvement, instead focusing obsessively on the details of Olivia's upcoming car. We've added the premium sound package, my father announced at dinner one night. And the sports wheels. It's going to be quite something. I pushed my food around my plate, saying nothing. What was there to say? They had made their choice clear, and no amount of guilt could change that now. The day before Olivia's birthday, I was at Grandma Helen's house going over pre-surgery preparations when my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. OMG! Just got my car! Come see! Attached was a photo of her standing next to a gleaming white Mercedes, my parents beaming proudly in the background. The car was parked in our driveway, adorned with a giant red bow. Even through the small phone screen, I could see the leather interior, the gleaming dashboard, all the premium features my parents had so eagerly described. Grandma Helen glanced at my phone and her lips thinned. Well, I suppose that makes everything crystal clear, doesn't it? I nodded, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about seeing, in such stark terms, what and who my parents valued. That evening, when I returned home, the celebration was still in full swing. Olivia had invited friends over, and they were all taking turns sitting in her new car, exclaiming over features, and taking selfies. My parents were in the driveway, watching proudly as Olivia showed off her new status symbol. I slipped into the house unnoticed and went straight to my room. A few minutes later, there was a knock at my door. To my surprise, it was Olivia. "Hey," she said, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. "I noticed you got home. Don't you want to come see my car?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw for the first time not the golden child who had everything, but just my little sister who had been raised to believe she deserved everything. None of this was her fault, not really. "I saw the picture," I said. "It's beautiful, Liv. I'm happy for you." She beamed, but then her smile faltered. "Are you okay? You seem weird." "I'm having major surgery in 2 weeks," I reminded her. "And I just found out our parents prioritized your luxury car over my health. So no, I'm not really okay." Olivia's eyes widened. "What? No, that's not... They wouldn't..." She stopped, realization dawning on her face. "The surgery costs about the same as my car, doesn't it?" I nodded. "But they said they couldn't afford..." She broke off again, the implications sinking in. For perhaps the first time in her life, Olivia was seeing our parents clearly. "I didn't know, Emma. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," I said. And I did. Olivia might be self-centered, but she wasn't cruel. She was just a product of our parents' uneven love. She sat down on the edge of my bed, careful not to jostle me. "What can I do? Should I give the car back?" The offer surprised me, touching something deep in my heart. "No, Liv, it's not your responsibility to fix this. Grandma's taking care of my surgery, just maybe remember that there are more important things than cars and popularity." She nodded solemnly, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the person she might become outside of our parents' distorting influence. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of pre-surgery appointments and uncomfortable family dinners. My parents maintained the fiction that everything was normal, that there was nothing wrong with their choices. They never directly acknowledged that Grandma Helen was paying for my surgery, referring to it obliquely as the procedure or your appointment. It was as if by not naming it, they could avoid facing what it represented, their failure as parents. Meanwhile, Olivia drove her new Mercedes to school every day, but something had changed. She started offering to pick up my prescriptions or bring me food when the pain was too bad for me to come downstairs. Small gestures, but meaningful ones. The experience had opened her eyes, at least a little. The day before my surgery, Grandma, Helen came to pick me up. I would be staying with her for the duration of my recovery, a decision that had triggered another tense conversation between her and my father. She should be at home, with her family, my father had argued. Her family? Grandma had replied. You mean the people who chose a luxury car over her health? Those people? In the end, they had relented, probably relieved to be spared the daily reminder of their choices. As I packed my bags, my mother hovered in the doorway of my bedroom. You know we love you, right? She said, her voice small. I looked at her, this woman who had raised me, who had bandaged my scraped knees and read me bedtime stories, who had also made it devastatingly clear where I stood in her hierarchy of priorities. I know you love me, I said finally. Just not as much as you love Olivia. Not enough to put my needs first, even once. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not fair, Emma. Family finances are complicated. No, they're not, I interrupted. Not really. You had money. You chose how to spend it. And in doing so, you showed me exactly how much I matter to you. I zipped up my suitcase with finality. Grandma will be here soon. I should wait outside. As I walked past her, my mother reached out as if to stop me, then let her hand fall. There was nothing left to say. Standing on the porch with my suitcase, I watched as Olivia pulled into the driveway in her gleaming new Mercedes. She got out and approached me hesitantly. Are you leaving already? I thought the surgery wasn't until tomorrow. I'm staying. At Grandma's tonight, I explained. She'll take me to the hospital in the morning. Olivia nodded, then impulsively pulled me into a gentle hug. I'll be there, she promised. After school, I'll come straight to the hospital. I hugged her back, surprised by the warmth that bloomed in my chest. Maybe some good could come from this after all. Maybe Olivia was learning what our parents had failed to teach her about compassion and priorities. As Grandma Helen's car appeared, at the end of our street, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. Yes, my parents had failed me in a fundamental way. They had shown me where I stood in their hearts, and it was a painful revelation. But I had also discovered where I stood with Grandma Helen, at the very center of her concern, worthy of sacrifice and advocacy. And perhaps I had even begun to forge a new kind of relationship with my sister, one based on mutual respect rather than rivalry. The surgery would fix my spine, but these realizations were beginning to heal something deeper, my sense of self-worth, my understanding of what family truly means. As I got into Grandma Helen's car, I knew that whatever happened next, I would never again accept being treated as less than I deserved. My parents had made their choice. Now I was making mine. The morning of my surgery arrived with a strange sense of calm. Grandma Helen's guest room had become a sanctuary over the past week, a place where my pain wasn't questioned, where my needs weren't weighed against someone else's wants. I woke before dawn, watching the gradual lightening of the sky through the curtains while contemplating how much my life had changed in such a short time. Ready, sweetheart? Grandma Helen appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a soft blue sweater and comfortable slacks. She'd prepared for a long day of hospital waiting rooms. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, carefully swinging my legs over the side of the bed. The familiar pain shot through my spine, a sensation I had learned to anticipate, but never quite got used to. Soon, though. Soon, this might all be behind me. The drive to Riverside Memorial Hospital was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. I stared out the window at the awakening town of Mapleton, shopkeepers raising their shutters, early morning joggers with their breath visible in the cool autumn air, school buses beginning their routes. Normal life continuing while mine was about to be irrevocably altered. "Are Mom and Dad coming?" I finally asked, breaking the silence as we turned into the hospital parking lot. Grandma Helen's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Your father said he'd try to come during his lunch break. Your mother has a dentist appointment she couldn't reschedule." The words hung in the air between us, their meaning clear. Even on the day of my surgery, a procedure that carried real risks that would determine the quality of the rest of my life, I wasn't a priority. A dentist appointment couldn't be rescheduled. A lunch break might be squeezed in. "At least Olivia promised to come after school," I said, trying to focus on the positive. "That's something." Grandma Helen reached over and squeezed my hand. "You have me, Emma, every minute, and that's not going to change." The hospital admission process was a blur of paperwork, most of which Grandma Helen handled with the efficiency of a former nurse. I changed into a hospital gown, had my vitals taken, and answered the same questions from different medical personnel at least 5 times. Through it all, Grandma Helen remained by my side, her steady presence an anchor in the sterile, intimidating environment. Dr. Myers came by for a final consultation, his confident manner reassuring as he explained the procedure once more. "We'll be performing a posterior spinal fusion with instrumentation," he said, showing me the X-rays of my twisted spine. "We'll insert metal rods, hooks, and screws to straighten the curve and fuse the vertebrae together. It's a complex procedure, but I've done hundreds of these surgeries with excellent outcomes." I nodded, trying to focus on his words rather than the fear bubbling up inside me. This was major surgery. There were risks: infection, nerve damage, paralysis in the worst case. But the alternative, a lifetime of worsening pain and eventual disability, wasn't really an alternative at all. "Do you have any questions, Emma?" Dr. Myers asked kindly. I had dozens, but they all seemed to evaporate in the face of the imminent reality. I simply shook my head. "She'll be in good hands," Grandma Helen said firmly, and Dr. Myers nodded. "The very best," he assured her. "We'll take care of her." As the nurses prepared to take me to the operating room, Grandma Helen bent down and kissed my forehead. "I'll be right here when you wake up," she promised. "And Emma? Remember that you're worth this, all of it, no matter what anyone else has made you feel." Those words stayed with me as I was wheeled down the long corridor, fluorescent lights passing overhead like stars in a strange universe. I was worth this. The realization was both simple and profound. Regardless of my parents' choices, regardless of where I stood in their hierarchy of love, I was inherently valuable. My health mattered. My future mattered. I mattered. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took hold was this new certainty, settling into my bones, stronger than the titanium rods about to be inserted into my spine. I woke to the steady beeping of monitors and the peculiar heaviness that comes with powerful painkillers. The recovery room was dimly lit, a nurse moving quietly between patients. I tried to speak but found my throat raw from the breathing tube. "Easy there," the nurse said, noticing I was awake. "Surgery went well. Dr. Myers will be by soon to talk to you and your grandmother." Grandma Helen. I looked around, panicked for a moment until the nurse anticipated my question. "Your grandmother stepped out to make a phone call. She hasn't left the hospital since you went in. She'll be back any minute." Relief washed over me, followed by a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Grandma Helen had kept her promise. She had stayed. True to the nurse's word, Grandma appeared moments later, her face lighting up when she saw I was awake. "There she is," she said softly, coming to stand beside my bed. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I managed to rasp out. "But I'm okay." Dr. Myers arrived shortly after, bringing with him post-surgery X-rays that showed my spine now held straight by metal rods and screws. "The procedure went exactly as planned," he explained. "The curvature has been corrected from 52 degrees to just 10 degrees, which is within normal range. You did wonderfully, Emma. The next few hours passed in a haze as I was moved to a regular room and settled in for what would be a 5-day hospital stay. Grandma Helen remained a constant presence, advocating for me when the pain medication wore off too soon, making sure the nurses checked on me regularly, and generally creating the sense that I was being vigilantly protected. It wasn't until evening that my father finally appeared, looking uncomfortable in the hospital setting. He stood awkwardly at the foot of my bed, his eyes darting between the machines monitoring my vitals and the incision site that was hidden beneath my gown and bandages. "The surgery went well," Grandma Helen informed him coolly. "Not that you were here to find out." My father shifted his weight, guilt flashing across his face. "I had meetings I couldn't reschedule, but I'm here now. How are you feeling, Emma?" "I've been better," I said honestly. "But the doctor says everything went perfectly." He nodded, seeming unsure what to say next. The silence stretched uncomfortably until the door opened again, and, to my surprise, Olivia walked in. "Emma!" she exclaimed, rushing to my bedside with none of our father's hesitation. "I came as soon as school ended. How are you? Does it hurt a lot? Can I see the scar?" Despite the pain and the awkwardness of our father's presence, I found myself smiling at her barrage of questions. "Yes, it hurts. No, you can't see the scar yet, but I'm okay, really." Olivia pulled up a chair right next to my bed, opposite. "Grandma Helen." "I brought you something," she said, reaching into her backpack and pulling out a small wrapped package. It's not much, but I thought it might help. Inside was a soft, plush throw blanket in my favorite shade of teal. "Hospital blankets are always scratchy," Olivia explained, "and this one is super soft. I thought it might make you more comfortable." The thoughtfulness of the gift caught me off guard. This was a side of Olivia I rarely saw. Considerate, empathetic, thinking of someone else's comfort rather than her own desires. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "It's perfect." My father watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. "I should get going," he said finally. "Your mother will want to know how you're doing." "She could find out herself by actually visiting," Grandma Helen remarked, not bothering to lower her voice. My father's jaw tightened. "Catherine has her reasons." "I'm sure she does," Grandma replied. "None of them good enough." After he left, the atmosphere in the room lightened considerably. Olivia stayed for over an hour, chattering about school gossip and helping me adjust my position when the pain became too intense in one spot. When a nurse came in to check my vitals, Olivia watched with genuine interest, asking questions about my recovery process and what she could do to help once I was discharged. "You'll be staying with Grandma, right?" she asked after the nurse left. I nodded. "For at least 6 weeks, maybe longer depending on how the recovery goes." Olivia's face fell slightly. "Oh, I was hoping you'd come home. I could help take care of you." The offer was so sincere that it made my heart ache. "Thanks, Liv. That means a lot. But Grandma's house is all set up for my recovery already. And it's going to be pretty intense for a while. I'll need help with pretty much everything at first." "I could still visit, though, right?" she persisted. "I could drive over after school. I have my own car now, so I don't have to wait for Mom or Dad to take me." The irony of her using the car, the very symbol of our parents' skewed priorities, to bridge the gap between us, wasn't lost on me. But I appreciated the gesture for what it was. Olivia's way of trying to make things right, even if she didn't fully understand what had gone wrong. "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "Just call first to make sure I'm not in the middle of physical therapy or something." The next few days in the hospital were a lesson in patience and pain management. Every small movement was an exercise in endurance. Getting out of bed for the first time, just to take a few steps with a walker, felt like climbing Mount Everest. But with each small victory, sitting up for longer periods, walking a little farther down the hallway, I began to believe that there might be a life waiting for me beyond the constant pain I'd known for so long. My mother visited exactly once, on the third day. She brought flowers and a get well card signed by her colleagues at the dental office, as if I were a casual acquaintance rather than her daughter. She stayed for 20 minutes, her discomfort palpable in the sterile hospital room. "The flowers are lovely," I said, trying to bridge the growing chasm between us. "Thank you." She nodded, fiddling with her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd had for as long as I could remember. The office took up a collection. Everyone was very concerned. The fact that her coworkers, virtual strangers to me, had shown more collective concern than my own mother was a bitter pill to swallow. But I was learning to accept these painful truths rather than deny them. "I hear you're going to stay with Mom for your recovery," she said, glancing at Grandma Helen, who was pretending to read a magazine while keeping a watchful eye on our interaction. "Yes," I confirmed. "Dr. Myers says the first 6 weeks are crucial. I'll need a lot of help." My mother nodded again, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "Well, that makes sense. Helen has the nursing background, and with work and Olivia's schedule, it would be hard for us to provide the level of care you'll need." The excuses flowed so easily from her lips, as if she'd rehearsed them. Work, Olivia's schedule. Never an acknowledgement that they had chosen not to make room in their lives for my needs, just as they had chosen not to make room in their finances for my surgery. "Right," I said flatly. "It would be hard." An uncomfortable silence fell between us, filled only by the steady beeping of the heart monitor. After a few more minutes of stilted conversation, my mother made an excuse about a work commitment and left. The relief I felt at her departure was both sad and illuminating. On the fifth day, I was discharged from the hospital with a long list of care instructions, prescription pain medications, and appointments for follow-up visits. The journey from the hospital bed to Grandma Helen's car was exhausting, but it marked the beginning of a new phase, recovery in a place where I knew without a doubt that I was valued and loved. Grandma Helen had transformed her home in preparation for my arrival. The guest room had been outfitted with a hospital-grade bed that could be adjusted for comfort. Grab bars had been installed in the bathroom. A comfortable recliner had been placed in the living room so I could spend time out of bed without sitting upright for too long. Every detail had been considered, every potential need anticipated. "You didn't have to do all this," I said as she helped me settle into the recliner that first afternoon. "Yes, I did," she replied simply. "Because you're worth it, Emma. You're worth every bit of effort and expense. I need you to understand that, especially now." The weeks that followed were some of the hardest and most enlightening of my life. Physical recovery from spinal fusion surgery is notoriously difficult. There were days when the pain seemed unbearable, when even the strongest painkillers barely took the edge off. There were nights when I couldn't find a comfortable position to sleep, when tears of frustration and exhaustion soaked my pillow. Through it all, Grandma Helen was there, adjusting pillows at 3 a.m., helping me bathe when I couldn't manage it myself, driving me to physical therapy appointments 3 times a week. My father visited sporadically, always with the air of a man fulfilling an obligation rather than a father concerned for his daughter. My mother's visits were even less frequent, always brief and awkward. But to my surprise, Olivia became a regular presence at Grandma Helen's house. True to her word, she would drive over after school several times a week. At first, her visits were short and somewhat uncomfortable. She wasn't sure how to act around me in this new context, where I was both physically vulnerable and emotionally distant from our parents. But gradually, something began to shift between us. Olivia started, bringing her homework to do while sitting with me. She'd read aloud funny texts from her friends, or tell me about drama in the cheerleading squad. Sometimes she'd just sit quietly beside me, both of us watching a movie or show on Grandma's television. And in those quiet moments, a new kind of relationship began to form, one based on choice rather than obligation, on genuine connection rather than family expectation. One evening, about 3 weeks into my recovery, Olivia arrived looking unusually subdued. She sat on the edge of the sofa, fidgeting with the fringe of a throw pillow. "What's up?" I asked, immediately sensing that something was wrong. "Bad day at school?" She shook her head. "No, it's not that. It's—" She hesitated, then blurted out, "I sold my car." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "You what?" "I sold the Mercedes," she repeated, looking up at me with a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what Mom and Dad did, choosing to buy me that car instead of paying for your surgery, and I just couldn't stand it anymore. Every time I drove it, I felt sick, knowing what it represented. I was speechless. The car had been Olivia's dream, the thing she'd talked about for months. Liv, you didn't have to do that. It wasn't your fault." "I know it wasn't my fault," she interrupted. "But it wasn't right either, and I didn't want to be part of it anymore." She took a deep breath. "I got a really good price for it. It was barely used, and Mercedes hold their value. I put most of the money in a savings account, but I used some of it to buy something else." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a set of keys. "A used Honda Civic. It's 5 years old but in good condition. It gets me where I need to go, and that's all that matters." The significance of what she'd done hit me like a wave. Olivia, who had always defined herself by external markers of status and success, who had always needed to have the best of everything, had voluntarily given up the ultimate symbol of her privileged position in our family. Not because anyone had forced her to, but because her own moral compass had finally activated. "Mom and Dad freaked out," she continued, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Dad kept saying I'd been manipulated into feeling guilty, that I'd regret it." Mom actually cried. "Can you believe that?" "She cried over a car, but not once over you being in the hospital." The bitterness in her voice mirrored what I'd been feeling for weeks, but hearing it from Olivia, golden child, perennial favorite, was startling. "What did you tell them?" I asked. Olivia's smile grew. "I told them that some things are more important than luxury cars. That family should mean supporting each other when it really matters, not just when it's convenient or impressive. To other people." She paused. "I told them I was ashamed of them and of myself for not seeing it sooner." In that moment, my little sister seemed to grow up before my eyes. She had taken a stand, made a difficult choice based on principle rather than self-interest. It was a kind of courage I hadn't known she possessed. "I'm proud of you, Liv," I said softly. "Really proud. But you didn't have to give up your car for me." "I didn't do it for you," she replied, surprising me again. "I mean, not entirely. I did it for me too. Because I don't want to be the kind of person who benefits from unfairness. I don't want to be like Mom and Dad." She reached out and took my hand. "I want to be more like you and Grandma." The compliment brought unexpected tears to my eyes. For so long I had envied Olivia, her confidence, her popularity, the effortless way she seemed to navigate the world. It had never occurred to me that she might one day envy my moral clarity or Grandma Helen's steadfast integrity. "So, what are you going to do with the money from the car?" I asked, curious about her plans. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "I was thinking about maybe using it for college. State school instead of the private universities Mom and Dad want me to apply to. Or maybe taking a gap year to do something meaningful, like working with a nonprofit." She shrugged. "I'm still figuring it out, but I want it to be something that matters, you know?" I did know. In my weeks of enforced stillness during recovery, I'd had plenty of time to think about my own future. Before the surgery, I'd been so consumed by pain that long-term planning had seemed pointless. But now, with the promise of a life without constant physical suffering, I was beginning to dream again. Maybe pre-med, inspired by Dr. Myers and the medical team that had changed my life. Or perhaps nursing, following in Grandma Helen's footsteps. Something that would allow me to help others the way I had been helped. When Grandma Helen came in with a tray of tea and cookies, she found Olivia and me deep in conversation about possibilities, hers and mine. The surprise on her face quickly gave way to a pleased smile. "Look at you two," she said warmly. "Planning to change the world?" "Maybe just our little corner of it," I replied, accepting the cup of tea she handed me. That night, after Olivia had gone home and I was settling into bed, Grandma Helen sat on the edge of my mattress, just as she had done every night since I'd come to stay with her. "Your sister surprised me today," she said, adjusting my pillows with practiced ease. "Selling that car took guts." I nodded. "She's changing. This whole situation. It's changed all of us, I think." "That's often how it works, Grandma," replied thoughtfully. "Crises have a way of revealing who people really are, both the good and the bad. Your parents showed their true colors, but so did Olivia. And you, Emma, you've shown extraordinary grace through all of this." I hadn't thought of my response as graceful. Mostly, I'd been trying to survive, first the physical pain of my condition, then the emotional pain of my parents' betrayal, and now the challenging recovery process. But looking back, I could see what Grandma meant. I hadn't collapsed into bitterness or rage. I had accepted help when it was offered. I had allowed Olivia to make amends in her own way. I had begun to envision a future beyond trauma. "I've had a good example," I said, reaching for Grandma Helen's hand. "You've shown me what real love looks like, the kind that shows up, that makes sacrifices, that puts someone else's needs first." Grandma's eyes misted over. "Well, that's what family is supposed to do. Your parents just lost sight of that somewhere along the way." As I drifted off to sleep that night, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few short months. My spine was now held straight by titanium rods. My relationship with my sister had evolved from rivalry to something approaching friendship. My understanding of my parents had shifted from childlike trust to clear-eyed recognition of their limitations. And my connection with Grandma Helen had deepened into something that felt unbreakable. The road to physical recovery stretched ahead of me. Many more weeks of therapy, of gradually rebuilding strength, of learning to live with my new limitations and possibilities. But I faced it now with a certainty I had never possessed before. I was worth the effort, worth the expense, worth fighting for. And that knowledge, more than any metal hardware in my spine, was what would truly allow me to stand tall. As weeks turned into months, my physical recovery progressed steadily. The initial agony following surgery gradually gave way to discomfort, then to occasional twinges, and finally to a new normal. A body that was straight, but still healing. Stronger each day, but forever changed. By the third month, I was able to walk without assistance, though long distances still tired me quickly. By the fourth month, I could manage most daily activities independently, a freedom I'd once taken for granted, but now treasured deeply. Through it all, Grandma Helen remained my rock. She drove me to physical therapy appointments, celebrated each milestone in my recovery, and created a home environment where I never had to question my worth or wonder if I was a burden. In her sunlit kitchen, over cups of tea and homemade muffins, we talked about everything: my hopes for the future, her memories of the past, the complex feelings I had about my parents' choices. "People aren't all good or all bad," Grandma would remind me when I struggled with anger toward my parents. "They're just people, with blind spots and weaknesses and fears. Understanding that doesn't mean excusing what they did, but it might help you find peace with it." Her wisdom helped me navigate the complicated emotional terrain of my new reality. I was learning that healing came in many forms, not just the physical mending of bone and muscle, but the emotional recalibration of expectations and relationships. 6 months after my surgery, Dr. Myers declared me ready to return to school full-time. My senior year had been disrupted by the surgery and recovery, but with Grandma Helen's help and a supportive school administration, I had managed to keep up with my studies through home tutoring and online courses. Now, with just 2 months left in the school year, I would rejoin my classmates for the final stretch before graduation. The prospect filled me with both excitement and trepidation. So much had changed since I'd last walked those hallways as a regular student. I was physically different, straighter, taller by almost an inch now that my spine wasn't curved, moving with a new awareness of my body. But the more significant changes were invisible. A newfound understanding of my own value, a clearer vision of what mattered in life, a less desperate need for parental approval. "Are you nervous?" Olivia asked the night before my return, sprawled across the foot of my bed at Grandma Helen's house. In the months since she'd sold her Mercedes, she had become a fixture in my life, stopping by several times a week to do homework, watch movies, or just talk. "A little," I admitted. "It's weird. I know everyone, but I feel like I'm going to be the new kid somehow." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "People might act different around you at first. They always do when someone's been gone a while, especially for medical stuff. They don't know what to say." "Great," I groaned. "That's exactly what I want. To be the center of awkward attention." "Don't worry," she said, a mischievous smile spreading across her face. "I've got your back. Anyone gives you trouble, they'll have to deal with me. And I still have enough social capital to make their lives miserable." I laughed, grateful for her loyalty even as I recognized the irony. The social hierarchy that had once separated us, with Olivia at the top and me somewhere in the middle, now felt like a foreign country I'd left behind. I no longer cared about the same things, no longer measured my worth by the same metrics. My return to Mapleton High was indeed awkward at first. There were stares and whispers, clumsy questions about my surgery, and a few friends who seemed uncertain how to act around me. But there were bright spots too. Teachers who welcomed me back with genuine warmth, classmates who went out of their way to help me navigate the school day with my still limited stamina, and most surprisingly, a new respect from peers who had witnessed my journey from afar through social media updates Olivia had shared. "You're kind of a badass now," my friend Zoe informed me during lunch on my 3rd day back. "Going through major surgery, standing up to your parents, it's impressive." I nearly choked on my sandwich. "Standing up to my parents? What are you talking about?" Zoe glanced around the cafeteria before leaning in closer. "Everyone knows," she said in a stage whisper, "about how they bought Olivia that crazy expensive car instead of paying for your surgery, and how your grandma stepped in, and how Olivia sold the car afterward. It was like the biggest scandal since Mr. Peterson got caught dating Ms. Rivera from the English department." Heat crept up my neck. "How does everyone know about that?" Zoe looked at me like I was being deliberately obtuse. "Olivia told Maddie, who told Jason, who told basically the entire soccer team, and from there it was all over school. Plus, people noticed when Olivia suddenly showed up in a used Honda instead of the Mercedes everyone had seen her driving for like a week. I didn't know whether to be mortified or impressed by how thoroughly my private family drama had permeated the school gossip mill. Part of me was uncomfortable having my parents' failings so publicly exposed, but another part, a stronger part, recognized that there was power in the truth being known. No more pretending everything was fine, no more maintaining the fiction of a perfect family. When I confronted Olivia about it after school, she was unapologetic. "I didn't tell people to make Mom and Dad look bad," she explained as we walked to her car. "I told people because I'm not ashamed of what I did, and you shouldn't be ashamed of what you went through. Why should we protect their reputation when they didn't protect your health?" Her logic was hard to argue with, and as the days passed, I found myself caring less about what people knew or thought. I was focused on finishing the school year strong, on regaining my physical strength, and on making plans for my future. future that looked very different now than it had a year ago. One afternoon in late April, I arrived home from school to find Grandma Helen sitting at her kitchen table with a stack of official-looking papers spread out before her. Her reading glasses were perched on the end of her nose, and she was making notes in the margins of what appeared to be legal documents. "What's all this?" I asked, setting my backpack down and reaching for an apple from the fruit bowl. Grandma looked up, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Sit down, Emma. There's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." The seriousness in her tone made me instantly attentive. I slid into the chair across from her, watching as she removed her glasses and folded her hands on top of the papers. "You've been through a lot this past year," she began. "More than any young person should have to endure. But you've handled it with grace and strength that frankly amazes me every day." I felt my cheeks warm at her praise. "I had help. A lot of help." "Yes, you did," she agreed. "And you accepted that help without letting it diminish you, which is its own kind of strength." She tapped the papers in front of her. "These are the documents for a trust fund I've established in your name." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "A what?" "A trust fund," she repeated. "To be released to you in stages, part when you turn 18. Part when you finish college, and the remainder when you turn 25. My mind struggled to process what she was saying. "But Grandma." "Why?" "You've already done so much. The surgery, letting me live here." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Emma, when your grandfather died, he left me very well provided for, more than I could ever spend in my lifetime. I've lived simply by choice, not necessity." Her eyes, so like my father's but warmer, held mine steadily. "I always planned to leave something for both you and Olivia eventually, but recent events have made me reconsider the timing. You're almost 18, about to graduate high school and start your adult life. I want you to do that knowing you have options, that you're not dependent on your parents' support or approval." The magnitude of what she was offering washed over me. Financial independence. The ability to make choices based on what I wanted, not what my parents were willing to fund. No more being at the mercy of their priorities. How much is in the trust?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandma Helen named a figure that made me gasp. It was enough for college tuition at any university I might choose. Enough for medical school after that, if that's what I decided to pursue. Enough to buy a modest house someday, or start a business, or travel the world. "That's too much," I protested weakly. "I can't accept that." "You can, and you will," she said firmly. "This isn't charity, Emma. This is family taking care of family the way it should be. The way your parents should have taken care of you." Her expression softened. "Besides, what else am I going to do with it? Buy a yacht? Take up skydiving at 73? That startled a laugh out of me, breaking the tension of the moment. "You'd probably love skydiving, actually." Maybe I'll try it for my 75th, she mused with a twinkle in her eye. Then she grew serious again. "There's one more thing. I've established a separate, smaller trust for Olivia." This surprised me. "You have?" Grandma nodded. "She's shown remarkable character these past months. Selling that car, recognizing what was wrong about the situation, supporting you through your recovery. Those weren't the actions of a spoiled child. Those were the choices of a young woman with a strong moral compass, despite her upbringing." She smiled slightly. "Besides, I suspect your parents aren't going to be thrilled when they learn she's planning to attend State University instead of one of the prestigious private schools they've been pushing." I couldn't help but smile at that. Olivia had indeed decided on State University, with its strong nursing program and diverse student body, a far cry from the elite institutions. Our parents had always assumed she would attend. It was one of many ways she had begun charting her own course, independent of our parents' expectations. Have you told her yet? About the trust fund? Not yet, Grandma replied. I wanted to talk to you first. After all, you're the one who's been living here, who's seen the most direct evidence of my financial situation. I nodded, still trying to absorb the implications of Grandma's generosity. When will you tell my parents? A steely look came into her eyes. I won't be. These trusts are between me and my grandchildren. Thomas and Catherine have no say in how I choose to distribute my assets, and frankly, they've demonstrated that they can't be trusted to prioritize your best interests. The harsh assessment of my parents hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to defend them out of long habit, to insist that they loved me in their own way. But I couldn't deny the truth of Grandma's words. My parents had made their choices clear, and now Grandma Helen was making hers just as clear. Thank you, I said finally, inadequate words for the magnitude of the gift she was giving me. Not just money, but freedom, options, security. I don't know what else to say. You don't need to say anything else, she assured me. Just use it well. Make choices that align with who you are and what you value. That's all I ask. In the weeks that followed, life took on a dreamlike quality. I finished my senior year with grades strong enough to secure admission to several excellent universities, including my top choice, Berkeley, with its renowned biology program that would set me on the path to medical school. I regained enough strength to participate in graduation ceremonies without assistance, walking across the stage to receive my diploma with my spine straight and my head held high. And I began to plan for a future I once couldn't have imagined. One where I would leave Mapleton behind at least for a while to pursue my dreams in California. Through it all, my relationship with my parents remained strained and distant. They attended my graduation, sitting uncomfortably beside Grandma Helen in the audience. They hosted a small celebration afterward at our house, the house I still thought of as home, though I hadn't lived there in months. They gave me a generous gift card and made appropriate noises about being proud of my accomplishments. But there was a hollowness to their gestures, an awareness on all sides that something fundamental had been broken between us. They're trying, in their way, Grandma Helen observed as we drove home from the graduation party. They just don't know how to bridge the gap they created. Do you think they ever will? I asked, watching the familiar streets of Mapleton pass by outside the car window. Grandma considered this for a long moment. I don't know, she admitted finally. People can change, but they have to want to. They have to recognize what needs changing in the first place, and that's often the hardest part. Her words echoed in my mind a week later when my father showed up unexpectedly at Grandma Helen's house. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was sitting on the back patio, enjoying the June sunshine while reviewing housing options for Berkeley. Grandma was inside, napping after our large Sunday lunch. I heard the doorbell ring, followed by the murmur of voices, and then my father appeared in the doorway leading to the patio. He looked uncomfortable, out of place in Grandma's serene garden with its riot of summer blooms and buzzing bees. Can we talk? He asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside me. I nodded, setting aside my laptop. He sat down heavily, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. You're really going to Berkeley, he said. Not quite a question. Yes, I confirmed. I've accepted their offer and put down my housing deposit. He nodded, looking out across the garden rather than at me. It's a good school, prestigious. Far away, though. I didn't respond to that. The distance from Mapleton to Berkeley, over 2,000 miles, was not incidental to my decision. I had deliberately chosen a school that would give me the space to become whoever I was going to be, away from the shadow of my family's dynamics. Your mother and I have been talking, he continued after a moment, about everything that happened this year, with your surgery and afterward. He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. We didn't handle it well, any of it. The Admission, however vague, caught me by surprise. My father had never been one to acknowledge mistakes or shortcomings. That he was doing so now suggested something significant had shifted. "No," I agreed carefully. "You didn't." He sighed, finally turning to look at me directly. "I'm not here to make excuses. What we did, choosing to buy Olivia's car instead of paying for your surgery, it was inexcusable. I see that now. I should have seen it then." I studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation, but found only genuine regret. "What changed?" I asked. "Why are you saying this now?" He was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "A lot of things. Watching. You graduate after everything you've been through. Seeing how close you and Olivia have become. Realizing that my mother, your grandmother, had to step in because I failed as a father." His voice caught on the last words. "But mostly, it was a conversation with Dr. Rodriguez." The name was unfamiliar. "Who?" "My therapist," he clarified, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. "I've been seeing him for the past 2 months. Your mother, too, though we go separately." This was perhaps the most shocking revelation yet. My parents had always dismissed therapy as something for weak people who can't handle their own problems. That they were now both in treatment suggested a level of self-reflection I hadn't thought them capable of. "Dr. Rodriguez helped me see some patterns," my father continued. "How I've always favored Olivia because she reminds me of myself at her age. Outgoing, popular, good at everything. How I've never really understood you, with your quietness and your books. So I let your mother take the lead in parenting you. How we justified the car purchase by telling ourselves it was from a different account, as if money can't be moved from one purpose to another when something important comes up." He shook his head. "Weak excuses that let us do what we wanted to do instead of what we should have done." I sat very still, absorbing his words. They were validating in a way, confirmation that I hadn't imagined or exaggerated the unfairness of my parents' treatment. But they also stirred up painful emotions I thought I'd put to rest. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked again. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said quickly. "I don't expect forgiveness or a sudden reconciliation. I just—" He hesitated, then continued with visible effort. "I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I did, that I'm trying to be better, even if it's too late to undo the damage I've caused." The sincerity in his voice touched something in me. Not enough to heal the breach between us, but enough to crack open a door I'd thought permanently closed. "It's not too late," I said slowly. "Too late would be never acknowledging it at all. Never trying to change." I met his gaze steadily. "I can't promise you anything right now. I'm still processing everything that happened. Still figuring out what kind of relationship I want with you and Mom going forward. But I appreciate you telling me this." Relief washed over his face. "That's fair. More than fair, actually." He stood up, seeming reluctant to leave, but sensing that the conversation had reached its natural conclusion. "I'm proud of you, Emma. Not just for graduating or getting into Berkeley, but for how you've handled everything this year. You've shown more maturity and grace than I ever gave you credit for." The compliment warmed me, even as I recognized how hungry I still was for my father's approval, a hunger I was working to outgrow. "Thank you," I said simply. After he left, I remained on the patio, watching bees dance among Grandma's lavender bushes and thinking about the nature of healing. Physical recovery followed a predictable pattern: pain, treatment, gradual improvement, eventual resolution. Emotional healing was messier, less linear. There were setbacks and unexpected breakthroughs, old wounds that reopened and new insights that changed the context of past hurts. My father's visit was not a magical resolution to the complex family drama that had unfolded over the past year. But it was something. an acknowledgement, a beginning, a small step toward something different, if not completely healed. Later that evening, as Grandma Helen and I prepared dinner together, I told her about my father's visit. She listened without interrupting, her hands steady as she chopped vegetables for the salad. "What do you think?" I asked when I'd finished, recounting the conversation. "Do you think they're really changing?" Grandma considered the question seriously. "I think they're trying," she said finally. "Whether they'll sustain that effort over time remains to be seen, but the fact that they're in therapy is significant. It suggests they're willing to look at themselves honestly, which is the beginning of any real change." I nodded, absorbing her perspective. "I'm still going to Berkeley," I said, feeling a need to affirm this decision. "Of course you are," Grandma replied with a smile. "This isn't about changing your plans to accommodate their growth. It's about deciding what role you want them to play in your life going forward, on your terms." My terms. The phrase resonated deeply. For so long, my relationship with my parents had been on their terms, their expectations, their priorities, their convenience. Now I had the power to define what I needed from them, what I was willing to accept, what boundaries I needed to maintain my own well-being. As we sat down to dinner, I found myself filled with an unexpected sense of peace. The future still held many uncertainties: how my body would continue to adapt to the hardware in my spine, how college across the country would shape me, how my relationship with my parents might evolve. But for perhaps the first time, I felt equipped to face those uncertainties. Not because everything was resolved or perfect, but because I had discovered my own worth, independent of anyone else's validation. "To new beginnings," Grandma Helen said, raising her water glass in a toast. I raised mine in return, thinking of all the endings and beginnings of the past year. The end of constant pain, the beginning of physical healing, the end of blind trust in my parents, the beginning of a more honest relationship. The end of rivalry with Olivia, the beginning of genuine sisterhood. The end of defining myself through others' eyes, the beginning of seeing my own inherent value. "To new beginnings," I echoed, "and to standing tall in every way that matters." The Berkeley campus sprawled before me, a maze of historic buildings and towering trees, alive with the energy of thousands of students beginning a new semester. Standing at the entrance with my suitcases, I took a deep breath of California air, so different from the familiar sense of Mapleton, and felt a surge of exhilaration mixed with trepidation. This was it, the fresh start I had been both dreaming of and dreading since graduation. "Need some help with those bags?" I turned to find a tall girl with vibrant blue hair and an easy smile extending her hand. "I'm Riley. Your orientation. You must be Emma." "That obvious, huh?" I laughed, gesturing to my luggage and wide-eyed expression. "Everyone looks a little shell-shocked their first day," Riley assured me. "Even the ones pretending they're not. Come on, I'll show you to Bowles Hall. It's one of the oldest dorms on campus. Super character, slightly questionable plumbing." As we walked across campus, Riley pointed out landmarks and shared insider tips that wouldn't be found in any official university guide. I tried to absorb it all, but my mind kept circling back to the goodbye scene at the airport just hours before. Grandma Helen had been there, of course, steady and supportive as always. "You call me any time," she had said, holding me tight. "Day or night. And remember—" "I know," I'd interrupted with a smile. "I'm worth it." It had become our mantra. Over the past months, a simple affirmation that carried the weight of everything we'd been through together. In those 3 words was the reminder that I deserved care, that my needs mattered, that I had inherent value regardless of anyone else's assessment. To my surprise, my parents had also come to the airport. They had been making halting efforts to rebuild our relationship throughout the summer, inviting me to dinner once a week, asking genuine questions about my plans for college, even attending a few of my physical therapy appointments to better understand my ongoing recovery process. Their presence at the airport felt like another step in that gradual reconciliation. "We're proud of you," my mother had said, her voice thick with emotion that once would have been carefully controlled. "And we'll miss you. Call when you land," my father had added, awkwardly patting my shoulder. "Let us know you got there safely." But the most emotional goodbye had been with Olivia, my sister, who once seemed to exist in an entirely different orbit from mine, had become my closest confidant over the past year. We had forged a bond through crisis that proved stronger than years of parental favoritism and unconscious rivalry. "This is stupid," she had said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I don't know why I'm crying. It's not like we won't talk all the time." "It's not stupid," I'd assured her, fighting back my own tears. "It's going to be weird not seeing you every day." "You're going to kill it at Berkeley," she had said fiercely. "Show them all what Emma Hayes is made of." Now, as I followed Riley into the historic dormitory that would be my home for the next year, Olivia's words echoed in my mind. What was I made of? Titanium rods and screws, partly. The hardware in my spine a permanent reminder of both trauma and healing. But beyond the physical, what defined me now? What would I become in this new environment, away from the familiar constraints and expectations of home? My roommate Zara was already settled in when I arrived. A pre-law student from Chicago with a passion for social justice and an infectious laugh, she immediately put me at ease with her straightforward manner. "Top or bottom bunk?" she asked by way of greeting. "I have no preference, but fair warning, I talk in my sleep sometimes, so if that's going to drive you crazy, you might want to be further from my head." I laughed, appreciating her honesty. Bottom bunk would be better for me anyway. I had spinal fusion surgery last year, so climbing isn't always fun. Instead of the awkward sympathy or morbid curiosity this disclosure usually provoked, Zara just nodded. "Gotcha. Bottom bunk is yours. Need help getting your sheets on? Those mattresses are weirdly shaped." And just like that, my medical history became simply one fact about me among many. Not a defining characteristic or conversation. Stopper. It was refreshingly matter of fact, and I found myself relaxing into the interaction in a way I hadn't expected. The first weeks at Berkeley passed in a blur of orientation activities, introductory classes, and the gradual formation of new friendships. I had chosen biology as my major, with a pre-med focus that would hopefully lead to medical school. The coursework was challenging, especially organic chemistry, but I found myself thriving under the intellectual stimulation. After months of focusing primarily on physical recovery, it felt invigorating to exercise my mind so intensively. Physically, I was continuing to adapt to my post-surgery body. The titanium hardware in my spine no longer felt like a foreign intrusion, but simply a part of me. One that occasionally set off metal detectors and made me sensitive to cold weather, but otherwise allowed me to live a normal life. I found a physical therapist near campus who specialized in scoliosis patients and continued my exercises diligently, gradually building strength in my core muscles to support my restructured spine. What surprised me most, however, was how the emotional growth of the past year continued to unfold in this new environment. Away from the familiar dynamics of home, I discovered aspects of myself I hadn't known existed, a talent for explaining, complex concepts that made me a sought-after study partner, a dry sense of humor that emerged in late-night dorm conversations, a capacity for empathy that drew others to confide in me. "You're like a stealth therapist," Zara commented one night after witnessing me talk a panicked hallmate through a pre-exam meltdown. "People just naturally tell you their problems, and somehow you make them feel better without being all preachy about it." I hadn't thought about it that way, but she wasn't wrong. My own experiences had given me perspective on what truly constituted a crisis versus a temporary setback. I found myself naturally gravitating toward a role as listener and supporter among my new friends. By October, I had settled into a comfortable rhythm at Berkeley. I called Grandma Helen twice a week, updating her on my classes and campus life. She was thriving in my absence, having joined a water aerobics class and a book club that kept her busy and engaged. I spoke to my parents weekly as well, conversations that were gradually becoming less stilted, though still not entirely natural. And Olivia and I texted almost daily, sharing the minutiae of our new college experiences. She at State University studying nursing, me at Berkeley pursuing pre-med. It was Olivia who first mentioned the idea of spending Thanksgiving break with Grandma Helen rather than at our parents' house. "I know Mom and Dad are expecting us both home," she said during one of our video calls. "But honestly, I'd rather be at Grandma's. It's just easier." I understood exactly what she meant. Despite the tentative improvements in our relationships, with our parents, the prospect of spending several days under their roof still carried an emotional weight that felt exhausting to contemplate. "Let's do it," I agreed. "We can tell them we want to spend time with Grandma since we haven't seen her in months. It's not even a lie." The plan was set, and when November arrived, I boarded a plane back to Illinois with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Coming home after being away was always strange. The familiar made unfamiliar by absence. The self that had evolved in new surroundings suddenly confronted with the context it had grown beyond. Grandma Helen was waiting at the airport, her face lighting up when she spotted me. Despite our regular calls, seeing her in person made me realize how much I had missed her steady presence, her unwavering support, her quiet wisdom. "Look at you," she said, holding me at arm's length after a long hug. "California agrees with you. You're standing so tall." The observation brought tears to my eyes. Grandma wasn't just referring to my physically straighter posture, though that was certainly part of it. She was seeing the confidence I had developed, the sense of purpose that had solidified during my time at Berkeley, the emotional strength that had grown alongside my physical recovery. "I've missed you so much," I said, blinking back tears. "None of that now," she replied briskly, though her own eyes were suspiciously bright. "We have too much to celebrate for tears. Olivia's train gets in tomorrow morning, and I've got a turkey that's not going to cook itself." The drive back to Grandma's house was filled with catching up. Stories from campus that hadn't made it into our phone calls. Updates on Grandma's water aerobics competitions. She was becoming quite the champion in her age bracket. News about neighbors and family friends. It wasn't until we were settled in her kitchen with mugs of hot chocolate that she brought up the subject of my parents. "They're disappointed you won't be staying with them," she said matter-of-factly. "Your mother called me 3 times to try to change our plans." I sighed, cupping my hands around the warm mug. "I know, they've been better, but I'm not ready for the full family Thanksgiving experience yet. Maybe next year." Grandma nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Healing happens on its own timeline. You can't force it to fit someone else's schedule, no matter how much they might want you to." The wisdom of her words struck me anew. That was exactly what my parents seemed to be doing, expecting that because they had acknowledged their mistakes and were making efforts to change, I should be ready to resume a normal relationship with them. But trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired on command. It had to be rebuilt slowly, one small interaction at a time. "We're going to have dinner with them on Saturday," I said. Olivia and I decided that was a good compromise. One meal in a neutral setting with a clear beginning and end time. "Very diplomatic," Grandma approved, "and very healthy boundary setting." She reached across the table to pat my hand. "You've come so far, Emma. I hope you realize that." Olivia's arrival the next morning completed our small Thanksgiving gathering. She burst into Grandma's house in a whirlwind of energy, talking a mile a minute about her nursing program, her roommate's disastrous love life, and the terrible train food she'd endured on the journey. "God, it's good to see you both," she said, collapsing onto the sofa beside me after hugging Grandma. "I didn't realize how much I needed this until right now." Looking at my sister, I could see subtle changes that had occurred during our months apart. Her hair was shorter, cut into a practical bob that suited her new role as a nursing student. The designer clothes she had once favored had been replaced by simpler, more functional attire. But the most noticeable change was in her demeanor. Groundedness, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. "How's the Honda holding up?" I asked with a smile, referencing the used car she had purchased after selling her Mercedes. Olivia grinned. "That car is a tank. I love it. And the money I saved from not having car payments or expensive insurance, I used it to volunteer with a medical mission trip to Guatemala over fall break. Best experience of my life." As she described, the trip, working alongside doctors and nurses to provide basic care in rural communities, her face lit up with passion. This was a side of Olivia I never would have imagined a year ago. Committed to service, finding fulfillment in helping others, valuing experiences over possessions. "That's amazing, Liv," I said sincerely. "I'm so proud of you." She shrugged, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I'm just figuring it out as I go. But I think I'm on the right track now." She glanced at Grandma Helen. "Thanks to some pretty good influences." Our Thanksgiving was quiet but deeply meaningful. The three of us worked together to prepare the meal, sharing stories and laughter as we cooked. When we sat down to eat, Grandma suggested we each share something we were grateful for. "I'll start," she said. "I'm grateful for second chances. For the opportunity to be a bigger part of both your lives this past year, even though the circumstances that brought us together were difficult." Olivia went next. "I'm grateful for wake-up calls," she said thoughtfully. "For having my eyes open to things I was too self-absorbed to see before. And for the chance to become someone I actually like being." When my turn came, I found myself momentarily overwhelmed by emotion. "I'm grateful for unexpected strength," I said finally. "For discovering that being broken doesn't mean being defeated. For learning that sometimes the things that seem like the worst moments of your life can actually be the beginning of something better." We ate our meal with the comfortable familiarity of people who have weathered storms together and emerged stronger for it. There was none of the tension that had characterized family gatherings in the past, no walking on eggshells or measuring words. Just three women who had found in each other the true meaning of family: unconditional support, honest communication, and genuine care. Saturday arrived all too quickly, bringing with it the planned dinner with my parents. We had chosen a restaurant. In town, neutral territory that would allow us to leave when the meal was over, rather than lingering awkwardly as might happen at their house. "Ready for this?" Olivia asked as we parked outside the restaurant. "We can still bail and go get burgers instead." The offer was tempting, but I shook my head. "We've come too far to avoid them now. Besides, I'm curious to see if they've really changed or if it's just talk." My parents were already seated when we arrived, both looking slightly nervous. My mother had lost weight since I'd last seen her, and there was a softness in her expression. That was unfamiliar. My father seemed older somehow, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. "Girls," my mother said, standing to embrace us both. "It's so good to see you." The hug was unexpected. My mother had never been physically demonstrative, but not unwelcome. I returned it briefly before sliding into the booth across from them, Olivia beside me. The initial conversation was stilted, focusing on safe topics like our classes and campus activities. But as the meal progressed, my father cleared his throat and addressed the elephant in the room. "We know this is awkward," he said directly. "And we know why. We've been doing a lot of thinking and a lot of therapy these past months. We're trying to understand where we went wrong, not just with the surgery situation, but with how we've approached parenting in general." My mother nodded, her hands fidgeting with her napkin. "We had a session with Dr. Rodriguez where he asked us to imagine being in your position, Emma. to really put ourselves in your shoes and feel what it would be like to know your parents chose to buy your sister a luxury car instead of paying for surgery you desperately needed. Her voice caught. It was illuminating and deeply shameful. I hadn't expected such forthright acknowledgement. In our previous conversations, they had admitted making mistakes, but had never articulated so clearly their understanding of the impact of their choices. We also realized, my father continued, how we've always treated you two differently, not just with the car and the surgery, but in 1,000 small ways over the years, setting different expectations, giving different levels of attention and praise. He looked at me directly. We favored Olivia. We didn't mean to, but we did, and that wasn't fair to either of you. Beside me, Olivia tensed. I never asked for that, she said quietly. I never wanted to be the favorite. We know, my mother assured her. It wasn't about what either of you wanted or deserved. It was about our own issues, projecting our values onto you, living vicariously through your achievements, trying to create the perfect family image regardless of the reality. The self-awareness in their words was striking. This wasn't just superficial remorse or a desire to smooth things over. They had genuinely been doing the hard work of examining their patterns and understanding their failures as parents. So what now? I asked, not unkindly but with genuine curiosity. What are you hoping for from this conversation? My parents exchanged a glance before my father answered. Honestly, we're not sure. We know we can't undo the past or expect immediate forgiveness. We're just trying to do better moving forward, to be the kind of parents you both deserve, even if that means accepting a different kind of relationship than we might have imagined. The humility in his response touched something in me. For perhaps the first time, my parents weren't dictating terms or setting expectations. They were meeting us where we were, acknowledging our agency in defining the relationship going forward. I appreciate that, I said carefully. I can't speak for Olivia, but for me, I think I need time. I'm open to building something new, but it has to be based on honesty and respect, not pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Olivia nodded, beside me. Same. I'm still processing a lot about our family dynamics and my role in them. But I'm willing to try if you are. The relief on my parents' faces was palpable. Not because we had offered full reconciliation, we hadn't, but because we had left the door open for continued growth and healing. The remainder of the meal was lighter, focused on genuine conversation rather than performative family harmony. When we parted outside the restaurant, the goodbye was warm but not overly emotional, a realistic acknowledgement of where we stood rather than a pretense of perfect resolution. That went better than I expected, Olivia admitted as we drove back to Grandma's house. They really have been doing the work, haven't they? Seems like it, I agreed. It's weird to think of our parents in therapy, talking about their feelings, and examining their motivations. Good weird, though, she said thoughtfully. Like maybe they're becoming actual humans instead of just parents. Her description made me laugh, but it also resonated. Our parents had always seemed like fixed entities, unchanging, unfathomable authorities whose actions weren't to be questioned. Seeing them engage in self-reflection and growth was indeed humanizing them in a way that, while disorienting, also opened possibilities for more authentic connection. Back at Grandma Helen's, we recounted the dinner conversation, including our parents' surprising level of insight and accountability. People can change when they're motivated to, Grandma said, satisfaction evident in her voice. And nothing motivates quite like the fear of losing your children's love and respect. Do you think we should forgive them? Olivia asked, curled up on the sofa with a mug of tea. Grandma considered the question carefully. Forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone, she said finally. It's something you give when and if you're ready, for your own peace as much as theirs. There's no timeline for that. no obligation to offer it before you genuinely feel it. Her wisdom, as always, provided clarity without pressure. Forgiveness wasn't a simple decision to make or a box to check. It was a process, one that would unfold at its own pace as our relationships evolved and trust was gradually rebuilt. The remainder of Thanksgiving break passed too quickly, filled with lazy mornings, long walks through Grandma's neighborhood, and evenings spent playing board games or watching movies together. When it came time to return to our respective schools, I found myself reluctant to leave this haven of unconditional acceptance and support. "Remember," Grandma Helen said as she hugged me goodbye at the airport, "what you've learned this year doesn't stay behind when you go back to Berkeley. It goes with you. The knowledge of your worth, the strength you've discovered, the clarity about what really matters in relationships." "I know," I assured her. "I'm carrying it all with me." And I was. As the plane lifted off, carrying me back to California and my new life at Berkeley, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From a girl in constant pain, overlooked by her parents and overshadowed by her sister, to a young woman with a straight spine, a clear sense of self-worth, and the courage to define relationships on her own terms. The story wasn't over, of course. Life never offers neat endings or perfect resolutions. My relationship with my parents would continue to evolve, requiring ongoing honest communication and boundary setting. My body would always bear the marks of both trauma and healing, scars on my back, hardware in my spine, occasional limitations in movement or endurance. But these weren't deficits or ongoing burdens. They were simply parts of my story, elements that had shaped me without defining me. As the landscape below gave way to clouds, I thought about the patients I hoped to someday treat as a doctor. I would understand something fundamental about their experience, the vulnerability of being in pain, the courage required to trust medical professionals with your body, the complex emotions that accompany physical challenges. My own journey through pain and healing wouldn't just be a personal narrative. It would be a well of empathy from which I could draw in service to others. And perhaps that was the greatest transformation of all. The ability to look back at even the most painful chapters of life and recognize their value, to find meaning in suffering and purpose in recovery. My parents' failure had led to Grandma Helen's intervention, which had not only straightened my spine, but had straightened my understanding of what family should be. Olivia's initial obliviousness had given way to a profound awakening of conscience and a redirection of her life's purpose. And my own passive acceptance of less than had been replaced by a fierce certainty of my inherent value. None of these changes would have occurred without the catalyst of that devastating moment when I learned my parents had chosen Olivia's luxury car over my essential surgery. What had seemed like the ultimate betrayal had ultimately set in motion a chain of growth and healing that had transformed all of us. As the flight attendant announced our cruising altitude, I reclined my seat slightly, mindful of not putting too much pressure on my lower back. The physical reminders of my journey would always be with me, but they no longer defined me. What defined me now was the strength I had discovered, the boundaries I had learned to set, the authenticity I had embraced, and the future I was creating. One choice at a time, with my spine straight and my head held high. The path ahead was open, full of possibilities I once couldn't have imagined. Medical school, perhaps a specialization in orthopedics or pediatric surgery. A life built on my own terms, rich with meaningful work and genuine relationships. A continuing evolution of family connections based on truth rather than obligation or appearance. I pulled out my journal and began to write, capturing these reflections while they were fresh. As I wrote, a sense of profound gratitude washed over me. Not just for the physical healing that had occurred, but for the deeper healing of self-perception and relationship. I had learned to stand tall in every sense, to value myself even when others didn't, to recognize true support, and to set boundaries against false care. These were lessons worth the pain they had cost. Lessons I would carry forward into whatever came next. Lessons that had transformed a story of betrayal and suffering into one of resilience and hope. My story, still being written, one day at a time, with a straight spine and an open heart. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.